Okay, today we're going to be looking at area and perimeter, and then we're going to be making your own DIY face masks like this one here. When we look at area and perimeter, we're going to be mostly looking at area and perimeter of rectangles and including algebra as well. So if that's something you need to practice, then stay watching. And then at the end, after we go through a few questions, I'm going to give you the perfect dimensions to making a face mask just from some old clothes, like this one here. So before we get into the video, can I just say a few days ago, the BBC News posted a link, which I've put down below, of their own DIY face masks and how to make them. This is my own version, but you can have a look at the other versions as well. But as a filter for the inside, what they've done is they've used kitchen roll. So whether or not kitchen roll is the best filter to use, I really don't know. I've tried to research it, and it's just so much mixed reviews basically. So maybe have a go at researching. So it is a bit of maths fun, DIY, make your own face mask. But I've just gone by what most people are doing on the internet and also the BBC News by using the kitchen roll within the face mask to act as a filter. Okay, we're going to be looking at area and perimeter, as I've said before. So first of all, let's look at what area is, what the area of a rectangle is, first of all, before we go on to perimeter. Okay, so the area of a shape is basically how much space there is inside the flat surface. So I'm just going to highlight the inside just to show you exactly what the area is. So as you can see, I'm just highlighting the inside, so I remember that it's the area of the shape that I'm looking for. And then we'll look at a few examples to see how we can work out the area of a rectangle. Okay, so for the first rectangle, so this rectangle, when we look at rectangles, we like to look at the width and the length. So this one has a width of 2 centimetres and the length of this rectangle is 6 centimetres. So if it has a width of 2 centimetres and a length of 6 centimetres, I'll show you how to work out the area. It's really easy. So the area will just be the width, which is 2 centimetres, multiplied by the length. So 2 times 6, and that gives you the area. So because the width and the length are in centimetres, the area then would be centimetres squared. So the answer to this question would be the area is equal to 12 centimetres squared. So remember, you're just doing 2 times 6. This is just finding the area for a rectangle. Okay, let's look at another example. So for the second rectangle, again, just need to remember, so to find the area, it is the width, which in this case is 7 metres, and you need to multiply it by the length, which is 11 metres. So the area of this shape would be width multiplied by the length, so 7 multiplied by 11. And the answer is, of course, 77 metres squared, because the dimensions are in metres. The units are in metres. Okay, now that we've had a practice on finding the area of shapes, we're going to move on to look at some algebra. So if these area questions came up but in the form of some algebra using letters instead. So all you need to remember is that the area is the space inside of a flat surface, and all you need to do is multiply the width by the length. Okay, let's have a look at a few more examples of area. So this time I've drawn 3 different quadrilaterals or 3 different rectangles. And we can go through some examples and see if you can work out the area of each one of them. Okay, so just remember that the area is the inside. So I'm just going to highlight the area of each shape, the inside of the shape. So we know how much space is inside of a flat surface. Okay, if I was going to give this a width of y, so instead of giving it a number, I'm just going to call it y. I'm going to pretend that y is the number and the length is t. So remember, the area, you multiply the width by the length. So in this case, the width of this shape is equal to y, so the width, and then multiply it by the length, which happens to be t. So the area is equal to y times by t, the length of it. So this is an example of finding the area in terms of algebra. Now, when we use algebra, we don't use the multiplication sign if we're multiplying two letters together, because people might think it's an X. So instead, we just have to write YT. So if you have two letters together, it just means Y times T. So instead of writing Y times T, I can just write YT, okay? Or I could also write TY, it doesn't matter. Y times T is the same as T times Y. Okay, this time I'm going to ask you a different question. So this rectangle shows that the area is equal to 24 meters squared. What I want you to have a think about is, what could the width and length be? So we're going to work backwards slightly. So I haven't given you the width and length, but we do know that the width times length will give us the area. So in this case, the area is 24 meters squared. What could the width and length be? So you're basically thinking of two numbers. When you multiply them, it gives you the answer of 24. So it could be 2 and 12. They're factors of 24. Could be 6 and 4. It could be 1 and 24. It could be 3 and 8. So these are all possibilities of a width and a length. So one example could be 3 meters by 8 meters. So there are lots of different ways, because we know that 3 times 8 is 24, or it could be 1 times 24 is 24, or 6 times 4, or 2 times 12. So you're sort of finding all the factors there are of 24 and seeing what possible solutions there might be. Okay, I'm hoping you're feeling a bit more confident on area now. I'm going to show you one last example before we move on to perimeter. So this time, this shape has an area of 36 centimeters squared. So this shape has an area of 36 centimeters squared. I want you to think of what the length could be. So if we know that the width is 3 centimeters, what could the length be? Remember, the width times the length is equal to the area. So 3 times the length is equal to 36 centimeters squared. So the area is where we multiplied the width, which we know is 3, by the length. And we don't know what the length is, but that's what we need to work out. So I could just put a question mark there. So if the area is 36, 3 times multiplied by a number is equal to 36. So that's what we've got to figure out now. So if you know your times tables, you'll realise that 3 times 12 is in fact equals to 36. Okay, we're going to leave area there for now, and we're going to come back to it later. So we're going to move on to perimeter. So perimeter, as you can see, is the total distance around a shape. So we're going to be looking at rectangles again for perimeter, and you just need to remember that the perimeter is you're measuring the distance around a shape. So if I've got two examples, let's look at the simpler example. So I'm just going to highlight the word around. Well, when we were looking at the area, it was the inside, the space inside. But for perimeter, it's just the distance around the shape. So I'm just highlighting it as an example. So here I've got a width of 6 meters and a length of 12 meters for this example. So if I'm looking for the perimeter, I'm just going to be working all the way around the shape. So that's 6, add 12, add 6, add 12. So because I've got two lots of 6 meters and two lots of 12 meters, it's almost like saying 2 times 6, and then which is of course 12, and then 2 times 12, which is 24. And if I add them together, that would give me 36 meters. So the perimeter of this shape would be 36 meters. Okay, now we've got a compound shape. So to find the perimeter of this shape, remember that the perimeter is when we're looking all the way, the distance around the shape. So I'm going to highlight again the perimeter. So I've got 5 centimeters, add another 5 centimeters. I'm just going to keep going around the shape, add 9 centimeters. It might be a nice idea if you're measuring out perimeter just to use your highlighters to remember which part you've added. Add 1 centimeter, add 4 centimeters, add another 4 centimeters, and that should give us the perimeter. So you can see that 5 add 5 is equal to 10. And then 9 add 1 is also 10, and 4 add 4 is equal to 8. So remember, the perimeter is when you're just working out the total distance around the entire shape. So that should give us 28 centimeters. Okay, so once you've had a practice of that, we're going to be again looking at other examples of perimeter, but this time using algebra. So instead of numbers, we're going to be using letters. So this over here, if this is x, so I've drawn a square. So the width and the length are both x. So remember, when we're looking at the perimeter, we are looking at the distance all the way around a shape. So to find the perimeter, it will be x, add x, add x, add x, as all the sides are the same. Now, instead of writing x out 4 times, what you need to remember is if you keep repeating the same thing again by adding it, so repeated addition is multiplication, okay? So we've added the x 4 times, so it's x, add x, add x, add x. A different way we could write that is by saying 4 times x, but remember, we don't write the multiplication sign in algebra. We just write 4x, like the example before when we were looking at the area. So I don't have to say 4 times x, I could just write 4x. Okay, let's have a look at another example. This time the length is t and the width is q. So of course the perimeter, all the way the distance around the shape, would be t, add q, add t, add q. See if you can work out how else I could write the perimeter rather than t, add q, add t, add q. So I've got 2 t's over here, so 2t, add, and then I've also got 2q, so 2q. 2t add 2q is the perimeter for this shape. Okay, so I've got a question now. You've got to find the area and perimeter of this shape. So if you want to press pause and have a go, otherwise carry on watching. So you've got the width and the length. So the area would be the width times the length, so BA, or we could also write it as AB. So A times B or B times A. And remember, in algebra, we don't need to write multiplication in case people think it's an X. We just write BA or AB. And then the perimeter, remember the perimeter is the outside of the shape. So that would be B add A add B add A, or another way of writing it, a shorter version or a shorter way of writing this is if we've got 2 B's, add and then 2A. So the perimeter will be equal to 2B add 2A. Okay, last question before you make your face masks, I promise. Just have a go at this question. So I've drawn out a shape for you and I've given you the area and the perimeter. I want you to have a think about what the width and the length could be. So the area is equal to 15 centimetres squared. That's the inside. So the width multiplied by the length would give you 15 centimetres squared. And then the perimeter of the shape is 16 centimetres. So that's all the way around the outside. The distance around the shape is equal to 16 centimetres. So press pause and have a go, and then carry on playing this for the answer. Okay, we know the area is equal to the width times the length. So you're looking for 2 numbers when you multiply them, give you 15. So it could be 3 times 5. It could also be 1 times 15. There aren't really any other factors for 15, not whole numbers. So which of the above then would give us a perimeter of 16 centimetres? So we've got 3 times 5 and we've got 1 times 15. So we've got 2 options, but one of them we can only have 1 width and 1 length. So we're going to have to look and see which of the 2, is it the 3 times 5 or the 1 times 15, that would give us a perimeter of 16 centimetres. So I'm just going to draw it out quickly. If it was 1 by 15. They don't add to 16 centimetres, so it must be 3 by 5. So I'm just going to check. So width of 3 and a length of 5. 3 add 5 is 8, and then another 3 add 5 is also 8, and 8 add 8 is 16. So the length would be 5 centimetres, and the width would be 3 centimetres. Okay, I'm now giving you the dimensions that I've used to make my own face mask. Now, the clue is it's a square. It has an area of 625 centimetres squared and the perimeter is 100 centimetres. So I'm not going to tell the answer just yet. See if you can work out what the length and the width need to be for the face mask that you're about to make. Okay, so first I've drawn out the measurements 25 centimetres by 25 centimetres on a piece of paper first, so then I can just draw around it on top of my t-shirt. It's just easier that way. So once I've done that, I can then just cut it out, cut around it, and then the next thing you want to do is just fold that cloth now into half, and then we're going to start sewing from the top. Now I'm just using a very simple back stitch here. So just to seal both ends together, I'm just going to do a back stitch at the top. Next, before you turn it inside out, so don't worry if it's messy, you just want to fold in some kitchen roll, and I'm just going to place it on top, and then I'm just going to turn them both in together so it gets rid of any messy stitching and then you can't see it. So once it has been folded over like that, you're just going to get your hairbands or your elastic bands and place one on each end. Okay, so just to start with one side now, this time we're not going to do a back stitch, we're just going to do a running stitch, so really simple.